Hey guys, Rob here at 3D Printscape. Today I'm going to show you how to set up custom supports in Cura. There are a lot of models where the default supports that Cura adds are just excessive or don't work out well or hard to get off or whatever the case may be. And in many cases you can get away with just adding a single support. Alright, so I'm going to show you how to actually do that. We'll walk through installing a plugin and then walk through the process. Before we jump over to the computer, make sure you guys hit that like button and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. Thank you. Alright guys, so I'm here at the computer and I got Cura up. This is the latest version at the time, so this is 461 I believe. Yeah, 461. And I just have the basics set up right now. I've got my Cura printer in and just a couple basic plugins that we talked about in previous videos. Alright, so let's go ahead and walk through the process of installing the custom support plugin, and then I'll show you how to use it with the Baby Yoda 3D object. It has one spot in particular that really stands out, so we'll use that one. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. First, let's go over to the marketplace. Looks like there's an update for Octoprint, but I'll get to that later. And we want to search for custom supports, which would be this guy here. And then if you take a look at the last updated date, you can see that they are updating this at least somewhat frequently, with the recent update being a couple days ago. And then there's been almost 30,000 downloads of this, so it's a well-used plugin. So let's go ahead and install it. It installs just like any other plugin we've done here with Cura. You just accept a license agreement. It installs, then you got to restart Cura. So it's installed now, and let's go ahead and restart. Alright, so now that we got Cura up, let's go ahead and drop in our model that we're working with, which is this guy. I want to just do a quick slice here to show you the spot that I'm talking about. It would be right here. And up here is somewhat bad, but not as bad. But this is the biggest one. Alright, so let's just slice, and then I'll go over to the preview and show you exactly what I'm talking about. Alright, so going over to preview. Let's go all the way down to the bottom here and zoom in a little bit. We're close to the bottom. You see right here where those fingers are? When you actually get to that layer, there's no support, which is why this is a good example. It's just going to print this kind of in mid-air, and it will end up being a stringy mess. Then if you continue up, you'll see you could potentially do a little support here, but there's not much of a gap. I haven't had any issues with that part. And then same with the fingers. You could do a support here, but it's building up little by little. And if you have decent cooling and okay bridging, it's not really even a bridge, you'll do just fine there. And then same with the ears as well. But you can see here that it's building up the bottom layers pretty evenly, so it's not doing any longer jumps. You could, if you wanted to, add supports here and here just to help the print out. I don't think it's always necessary. It just depends on your printer. Alright, so let's go back over to prepare. And if we just add in the basic supports, let's take a look to see what that looks like. Alright, so if we go under supports, generate support, go ahead and enable that, and then just do everywhere. Let's go ahead and slice that real quick, and then alright, now let's go ahead and take a look to see what that does. As you can see, it's adding a lot of support and a lot of material. If you look at all of this for the ears, this finger is entirely covered, a little bit through here, all of that around the hand. You're really just adding an excessive amount of material that can be very difficult to get off. Alright, so now let's go ahead and go back over to prepare again. And then if we change this to touching build plate, and then show you what that looks like. And in a lot of cases, touching build plate will get you by. It just really depends on the model you're working with. There's not much to just setting that up. As you can see, I just select it and hit slice, so I don't want to do a full video on something like that. I just want to really cover when you might need to do something else. To me, that's the more important part. And then you can also change the support density. Should have mentioned that as well when you're working with the default settings. I would probably take this down to 10%. Alright, so let's go ahead and jump. And again, we're using a lot of filament, but not as much. See, this isn't too bad. You've got the ears supported, and then you've got this hand supported, but if you look, it still missed the finger, which is one of the biggest issues with this type of print. It's creating the support. Let's go up a couple layers here, but you can see that the finger is still being created without actually touching anything. So you're still going to have that stringing even though you're putting all of the support on there. So that just doesn't work. Alright, so let's go back over to prepare again and go ahead and set up our custom supports. Alright, now that we're back under prepare, first thing I want to make sure to mention is you want to make sure generate support is unchecked. I have it checked just because I was showing you the other support options. That said, if you want to change any of your support settings, the easiest way to do it is here with it checked. So let's just switch this to 10% as an example and then uncheck it. Oops. So it saves those settings. So some of those settings will be used by the custom support plugin, and it's just easier to get to them just by making sure that that's clicked, changing the ones you want if you want to change the actual support pattern as well, and then going back and unchecking that. Alright, so enough of that. Just make sure it's unchecked when you're done. Alright, so let's go ahead and select the model here and go down to custom supports. Let's go ahead and use the cylinder, and we just click on the model here, and it will add a cylinder based on the size you have here by default, but we're going to have to adjust that anyways, so whatever size you start with is fine. You can select the custom support just like anything else, and then you can move it around like anything else as well. Alright, so let's see here. So that's touching all of the fingers there at 20 by 20. If we want to go a little bit higher, we can. Alright, if we take a look at the object here, we can use the different axes here to increase the sizes or move things around. The color is based on the color coding over here, so red is going to be X, Y is going to be green, and Z is going to be blue. Alright, so first let's go ahead and just move this up to where we want it. You gotta play a little bit just to get it right. Sometimes Cura can be tricky, but once you're good there. So let's just raise this up 20. Oops, that's too much. Let's just do 10. That should that's a little bit higher than I want it again. So let's just do 5. So you can see here that that's covering all of that. So now let's go ahead and go over to scale once we get this realigned again. Just turn around. That looks okay. And we can either lower this or just let it kind of sit here because it has a base. I don't like that though. Would probably be okay because it's not creating the support here. It'll just look like crap down here, but that's not what we want to do. We want to scale this down. So if we go back over to scale, we can drag this and it will kind of increase the size. Now we want to just make sure that we are flush on the Z-axis, and that is not quite flush yet. I have it about the size I want, so the easiest way to get it to be flat again is to just go back here and move this down to 0. So it moved it down just a tad, but that's fine. And then we can create another support for his other finger here. So let's just go ahead and go to support. We'll just do a smaller one here. So let's just do, we'll start with 10 by 10. Nope, not 201, 10 by 10. All right, and then that's good. We'll click here, and it created the base that we're looking for. And we'll just go ahead and move this over to get it aligned how we want it. All right, I think that is I think we want to make this a little bit wider here as we're going. All right, so let's just do oops, sorry, wrong one. Let's go ahead and scale this to 15 by 15, but make sure uniform scaling is not enabled, unless it's going to scale all of them the same, which is fine for most cases, but that's not what we want here. All right, so that covers that. Now let's go to move this again. We want to be careful because we want to make sure that we can actually take this off without issues. It will create a breakaway point. All right, so let's go ahead and slice that to see what it looks like. And while that's slicing, again, you could do the ears too if you wanted. I probably wouldn't if I'm just doing this for a play around print, but if I'm doing this for like a gift or something like that where it's going to be more on display and not just thrown around, I would add the supports just to make sure it's cleaner. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at what this did. If we go to preview again, we can scale down and we can see what the supports look like. Again, they're set at 10%, so they're going to be pretty easy to break away when it's done. It's not actually touching the model here. It's kind of like a tree support in that matter. So again, it'll be easy to break away. And let's see how it looks when it hits the fingers. As you can see, it's still creating that finger kind of floating in mid-air, though it's going to be going from here to here, so it will be a lot better. But let's go ahead and try to correct that. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at our support settings again. Right now it's set to touching build plate. Let's switch this to everywhere. Alright, so that's set to everywhere. Let's go ahead and slice it now. Alright, I wanted to show you this as an example really quick. I left generate support checked. And let me show you what that does here. So it adds in additional supports like for the ear here that it thinks it's needed, plus leaves the custom supports that you added in there. Let's see if it ended up fixing that issue, just curious. Not quite, but it does give it the support it needs. That would probably work. Again, this is a really tricky model with that finger. This would probably turn out just fine. But let's go ahead and go back to prepare and uncheck generate support. I want to show you how that looks now. All right, let's go back over to prepare. And as you can see, it didn't add the support for the ear that it showed before or all the other supports that were in there, just the custom ones that we created. All right, so everywhere this, let's zoom in a little bit better here. This will create the support it needs for the finger because the finger will be built on this brace here versus kind of floating out in the middle of nowhere. And you can see that it's kind of setting this little breakaway points on both of the fingers so that it will come off easy. And then going back up, you can see that it's doing the same thing all the way up until we get to where we don't have the supports anymore. And then over on the right here, it's going to be doing the same when the actual finger and arm comes into play here. So it's just building it around it. So that should break off pretty easily. Again, supports they're kind of a pain. it's one of those things where you got to figure out what makes the most sense. Do you want to spend the extra time trying to clean it up, or do you think the model will be okay without it? In cases where it's obvious, like with the fingers where it won't be okay without it, you've got to add supports, unfortunately. So understanding how they work is really, I wouldn't say really a requirement, but it's really a good skill to have if you're going to be printing a lot of things. All right, so I think that this will be fine. I want to go back down here and check one more thing. I want to make sure that it's not actually connecting to the base, which it's not. You can see here it's kind of, oops, let me get my angles right. If you can see here, it's leaving that gap so it still breaks away easily, and this one's not actually touching. So this is what we're looking for. Now, right now it's showing about 20 hours. I have a different infill selected from when I was messing around with a different setting. So let me go back to actually print this how we should. So if we go to infill, let's go ahead and set this to 20%, either 15 or 20% should be fine. It depends what you're doing with it. And then go down to the infill pattern, and I'll probably just go to grid. And go ahead and slice this again, see what we got. Also, it's worth mentioning that once you get more comfortable with supports, if you think you can drop it down to even 5%, it will save you some filament as well. And be easier to break off. So just keep that in mind. Right now it's set to 10, but it doesn't always have to be. Alright, so that reduced the print time significantly. And then if we look here, you can see it's going to be nowhere near as solid, but it's still what we're looking for. This will be fine for this type of model. Printing this at 50% does not make sense. Alright, so everything is looking good here. Now we can go ahead and save this to file and go ahead and start the print. So we kind of covered a lot there, and I was moving things around. Might have made it look more difficult than it really was. So I just wanted to go ahead and just recreate this one just to show you. It really only takes a couple extra minutes tops. So if I just delete this, let's go ahead and add another one in. So select this guy. We'll just do the 10 by 10 again, and then add that there. And then we can shift our camera angles around just to see where we want it. Oops, let me undo that, delete. Make sure that you select move, and then we can kind of just shift this around to get where we want. And to be honest, right there is probably fine for this print. That will give it what it needs. You could go a little bit higher, but that's not much of a bridge. That's really a small gap there, so it should be just fine. So that was added in all of about, what, 20 seconds? So don't think it's complicated. This model has always had random issues with Cura, so just ignore this. It's really just with this Baby Yoda model. I don't know why. Alright. But basically, after all that, just don't get overwhelmed. If you think a support's needed, you can try the default supports first to see if any of them meet your needs. To me, most of them just add too much extra infill or too much extra support, and you're breaking away way too much. I like the custom ones because I can just go ahead and drop in what I want. And this will be very easy to slice, easy to print, and still give us the benefits that we're looking for, which will be the clean model print, and it will break away cleanly. The other thing we could do, I guess it's worth mentioning, it's in more of the experimental phase right now, is the tree supports. So if we search for tree, we can add tree support. I have had a lot of issues on some of the models with tree support. It just doesn't actually get done with the slice. It basically crashes midway through. So you can give this one a try. If it works for you, great. I don't know if it's going to even work on this. We'll let it see what happens. It does a really good job putting in the supports where it's needed and creating it in a way that's using very little filament, but giving it more support really than the everywhere setting. So if it does work for the model you're looking for, that's also worth trying. Again, it's been very spotty for me. It does not work well with this one, at least not in this version of Cura. It might work better in previous, but if it's not working in the latest version, I tend to kind of avoid it. See, it's just sitting there. It might finish. I've let it sit for like 20 minutes before. It never finished. So just keep that in mind. It's an option. If it works, great. If it doesn't, go ahead and go back to the custom supports. And this is still crawling along. I'll pause the video for a second and let's see if it actually finishes, because I'd like to show you it. Okay, nice. It did finish. The last time I tried it was in 4.6.0, so they might have changed something in 4.6.1 that improves it. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So I still have the experimental supports in it, not the experimental, I still have the custom supports. So those would be there as well. It'll be working around that. As you can see, it looks like it's printing a lot, but if you go underneath it, it's really just creating a base and a bunch of extra little supports, and it's not touching the main thing. It's a lot better than everywhere, but not necessarily better than custom supports if you can get them set up right. So if you go down, you can see it's coming up just right off of it the entire way up. What this does is it allows for a very clean breakaway. I've done it a couple times in the past. I mean, you're talking probably the difference of getting annoyed and throwing the model around trying to get the supports off of if you have it everywhere set up, versus just spending like 30 seconds to a minute taking off the tree supports. So those work good in many cases. Again, it's working around the custom supports that we had here. It might have been good for these fingers as well. I didn't try it with this model last time I did it. I wanted to show you this because it is a standard support option, but the purpose of this video was for custom supports, so that was the main focus of it. But I wanted to make sure that you knew the tree support was an option. Alright, so if you have any questions or like to see anything in more detail, go ahead and leave a comment below. I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible, but that covers everything that I wanted to go over today. Alright guys, as you can see, adding the support isn't that difficult. We can actually place it where we need instead of where Cura thinks we need it. It helps reduce the amount of filament being used, it can save on print time, and also it's just easier to clean up the model. I mean, I know there are some options with dual extruder printers where you can print with a water dissolvable material for supports, but it's not realistic for most of us hobbyists. So I don't really even consider that an option. So in most cases, I'm either going to use the default supports in Cura, the Cura tree supports, or just create a custom support like we just went over. If you have any questions on the process or would like to learn anything else about Cura specifically, go ahead and leave a comment below. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. Thanks.